I thought we would set the scene on our topic and talk about change, but we're going to start by giving ourselves a description of it through the lens of a movie title. So I have asked my two guests to name a movie that describes change to them and why. So Alistair, what movie have you brought along to us today?
Sally, my movie today is Castaway by Tom Hanks. So reason for that is I think change can feel isolating, but building communities of practice are, I think is one aspect that can help resolve that. And if I think about the deserted island in Castaway, and the analogy there is that teams may feel isolated with familiar processes or tools that don't work, or support that is missing. And then Wilson in Castaway, so the volleyball was that kind of need for the human connection, right, in change. So the analogy of Wilson could be like the change champions, the communities of practice, that buddy. So anything that keeps the morale intact.
Fantastic. And what an immediate takeaway for the audience, that we need to create those Wilsons and look for those deserted islands and bring them together in communities of practice. Fantastic. Kate, what is your movie?
Well, now I'm glad I said I had a 7-year-old. My movie is Inside Out. And I think that's because the work that I'm doing is very much to do with receiving people when they're in the throes of redundancy. And change, whether it's redundancy or something else, is an emotional roller coaster. And often, I don't know who's seen Inside Out, but there's joy, there's sadness, there's anger, and there's fear, and they all have characters. And I think we feel like we should always be joy, and we're allowed to give a little bit of sad and maybe a little bit of anger in the right context, but there seems to be rules about it. When actually during change, all of these emotions are featuring, they're all competing, they're confusing, they're all getting different airtime, and there's an expectation versus a true human reality as to where that's going to kind of go. There's no path, there's no process, there's no structured flow chart. It will be what it will be for you. And I think emotions are happening silently behind all the change that happens. So if leaders aren't acknowledging the fact that we are human beings with these undulating emotions, then both parties are losing out, and we're really missing a trick with helping these human beings, pick themselves up and go off again. But again, change affects the people staying, going, etc.
From a perspective that I see with my clients and with the businesses that I observe and work with, I've got kind of two angles that I see. And I think I see the Italian Job. And if anyone's thinking of the film of the Italian Job, there's only really one scene that we can all imagine, which is this sort of bus that is hanging over the cliff. And I think the Italian Job for me starts with a brilliant plan, and it's got a sort of slick start to it, but the ending is a bit of a cliffhanger, and it sort of leaves everyone sort of hanging, so that we don't quite go to plan, is one side of change that I see. I think the other side I see, which I absolutely credit to the businesses that I see this in, and I definitely see this in some of my clients, it's mission impossible. Because when we see the plan and the deadlines and the turnaround and what is required, it feels like this is an impossible mission. But somehow, through sort of resourcefulness, grit, teamwork, loyalty, determination, and all of those things, somehow the team manages to pull it off. Today we want to give you all the tools for doing change better. So I've asked my guests to bring with them one tool that they think physically would be helpful within this process. So Alistair, what have you brought with you? What item is going to help us?
So I have, if anyone can see it, it's a whiteboard eraser. And I think what that signifies for me is just making it safe to unlearn and iterate. So, being able to kill old processes that don't work. And, I think we don't just write, but we erase.
I bought a puzzle piece. Okay. It's of Animals of the World, 200-piece puzzle, but a puzzle piece. Now, this this brings in kind of inclusivity as well as change. So bear with me on that. The inclusivity bit is that some of us learn really visually, and we need to see the full picture before we can decide where our part fits in. And I see change exactly the same. If we can see the full picture on the box, then we know what we're working to, right? We know what it's going to look like. We know where we fit in. If it comes to something like redundancy, and I know I'm focusing on that, but if we can see where the other pieces fit, it helps us understand the picture more, and then we know where our piece fits. But often when change is being done, we forget to even scramble the pieces together as a leadership team and have a look what that's going to be like. It's almost we hope it's going to work out, but we're not telling the people on the ground what the picture looks like. And I think some people, in my experience of redundancy, it felt like the juniors were being left to their own devices. But we say juniors, and these people are 20, 30, 40, 50. They are mature, intelligent, educated human beings, and we're leaving them completely guessing, feeling uncertain, feeling insecure. And this is not only the people that are potentially a part of the actual change itself. So seeing the whole picture and knowing where your piece fits in, I think it's incredible for everybody involved, and it makes people feel valued. It makes them feel part of the future, etc. Otherwise, to use the analogy further, people think they've been left out of the box, or it's been discarded, or it's not the right picture. They're not looking at the same thing. So yeah, so many ways to look at it, but I think it's an important one.
Fantastic. And I have also brought myself a tool with me today, and this, for anyone that can't see it, is a Swiss Army knife, and that's not because I'm going to cut anyone out of the process or cut a change, but actually because I am a communications expert, and I see communication used a bit like a butter knife, like a blunt tool to tell people about change far too frequently, rather than the Swiss Army knife that I think the multifunctional tool that communication can be. It can be used to listen, it can be used to reassure, to stabilize, to inspire, and to do so many things more than just tell. So I think my takeaway would be, let's use communication in the sort of multifaceted way that it should be.
I was a leader in creating the change as well as a leader on the block for redundancy, so it was a big structural change. So we were a leadership team trying to make the decision of working the business out with less people, and then trying to keep the rest of the team afloat, motivated, happy, etc. Now, it made me realize quite quickly how invisible people could feel. And I come back to what I said before, these people are human beings with degrees, intelligence, emotions, lives, feelings. And I think I managed one particular person, and he cried very, very quickly, and it really tested all my skills as a leader, but also made me realize really how human these fantastic, strong professionals were. When it came to the communication of the redundancy, it struck me how scripted it was, and how it was so instant, seeing that it was reading off a page rather than being human interaction. And the distrust spread, engagement went very low. People didn't know whether to carry on with their jobs, whether to keep reporting to that boss, etc. So it was very, very hard. And I think if I was going to learn from that, and I was still myself during the process, I was very honest and said what I did know and said what I didn't know, and said I'd try as hard as I could to find out what I could, because again, I was just, below the C-suite, but above the main team. It was, I think, more honesty across the board would have been learning to be able to say, we honestly don't know how this is going to happen in the process. In the meantime, we would like you guys to focus on X, Y, Z, not with a big polish, but actually just acknowledging the human side of it. And when it came to the people processing the change, I wish someone had said, go off for a week, go and do what you need to do. Some of you might need to go hiking in the peaks. Some of you might need to go to the pub. Do what you need to do to process this, because there is no point us talking to you about helping you with your CV, because you are not listening. You're in survival mode. You're all over the place. I think someone commented in the Lucy, you commented earlier on in the comments about how I think businesses get so practical so quickly when we forget there needs to be the human processing. It's almost like talking to a dysregulated child. You're not going to get through to them until they've calmed down. Same in this position. So we need to get our nervous systems down and ready to talk CVs and practical stuff but having processed the change. So a lot of the work I do is about helping people process, accept, get past that piece before they can build up the blocks to the next stage.
Obviously, we're talking a lot about trust today, but as you were talking about it, I can't help but share it's a Dutch phrase, but it translates into English as trust comes in by foot. In other words, it comes in quite slowly, but it leaves on horseback. So it goes out fast. And I think the thing is for leaders to understand that trust is something that we absolutely have to hold on to at all levels. And one of the ways we can do that is by having better conversations. And you mentioned, Alistair, that there was some personality and values clash, and then you mentioned the word surprise. And I often say to my leadership team and my board, I'm like, I don't like surprises. I don't like surprises because it suggests that we weren't prepared for something. And if we'd have had those honest conversations and been more human with each other, there would have been no surprise on either side. And you'd have both been able to decouple much more, gracefully. What is the biggest myth about change? So, Kate, do you want to go first?
And the biggest myth about change, in my opinion, is that people resist change. I think people resist badly led change, and there's a difference.
There is a difference. Thank you. Alistair?
I think the biggest myth is that change is neat. It's a schedule that you can control and tick off. The reality is that I think about change doesn't start with a Gantt chart. It starts with what you're willing to stand for when life refuses to follow the plan.
Lovely. Change is not a Gantt chart. I absolutely love that. Thank you, Alistair. That is precisely how we think we can manage it. Where's the danger zone in this process? So, Alistair, shall I come to you first?
Yeah. For me, it's between conviction and commitment. And what I mean by that is conviction is what you say. Commitment is what survives the first contact with inconvenience, right? So if you've declared like non-negotiables, and then the first interaction or the first deadline that comes up, and then those non-negotiables go out the window, that's the danger zone.
That is a massive. That's the connection of saying and doing, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Oh, you're full of gold mines today. And Kate.
I fear we're saying the same thing in different words. Mine is the danger zone is the silence between announcement and action.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're starting to test the waters and say this is going to happen, and then you go quiet, and then suddenly it happens. And I think not recognizing that inertia and that uncertainty and that fear you've put into a whole load of humans is massive.
What's one easy, tangible thing that businesses can do during change? Alistair, do you want to go first?
Sure. I think it's committing to and writing down a principle hierarchy. So, when conflict arises, you have a clear hierarchy in terms of what order to look at that. So it could be something like integrity, people, customer outcomes, speed, cost, whatever those principles are.
I love it. A principle hierarchy. That's fantastic. And Kate, so one tangible thing.
It's very much for me about the space to process before demanding movement, action, answers, chats. It's giving people the space to process in whatever way they need to process and however long that takes before you demand a plan, an answer, a conversation.
What's the one thing employees wish their leaders understood? So, Kate, let's go with you first, because I know this is something you're very passionate about.
A straightforward one. We're human first and we're employees second.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we will be the best employees if we are treated like a human. So
100%. Alistair?
Yep, couldn't agree more. And I think what I would add to that is, so employees don't fear change. What they fear is being changed on without the clarity, the fairness, or the agency. And I think we've spoken about that earlier, is that so as humans, we can do hard things, right? That's not the issue. I think what breaks that trust is the surprise and decisions made about individuals and not with them.
Now, if we go into this change process knowing it's emotional, then there's humans, and perhaps knowing that it's not just a Gantt chart and there's some danger zones, what is the quickest way that we can lose trust? Because if we know that, then we can try and avoid it. So, Alistair, let's go with you first.
Yeah, this is an easy one. It's a surprise.
Yeah.
Making a promise that you won't keep, hiding trade-offs, and then acting like nothing's changed.
Kate, over to you.
Very similar. It was, don't pretend you've got certainty when you haven't. And for some people, I was thinking, I talked about coping strategies and being in survival mode. As the person giving rubbish news, often your survival tactic is to lean out. And that leaning out makes people just think, oh, they've just let go, they're not here anymore, and then they feel completely abandoned and isolated, and the trust is then gone. So as hard as it is in a very hard situation, leaning in and being honest, bringing back some of the other words we've used, far better than leaning out and pretending you're all cool with it.